Hello and thanks for joining me for some more landscape photography. And as has become something of a tradition for this channel, it's been a while since the last one. Sorry about that. This is my 188th video, and probably the last 5 videos have taken me 6 months to make. Whereas back in the early days, I was cranking them out at points twice a week. So if you're new here, do feel free to subscribe because there is quite a back catalogue to grind through. What has also become a bit of a tradition is because there's such a gap in between my videos that I go back over some recent images that I've shared on social media, which you may not have seen if you only check out my stuff on YouTube. So let's start with 2 or 3 images that I've taken over the last month or so. Now, I can't honestly remember a video where I shared some images that didn't include one from a dog walk, because I always carry my camera and very often there's something worth taking a shot of. In this instance, it was a high tide with the estuary running out to the sea, and at normal shutter speeds it was freezing the ripples on the estuary, and I just didn't like the effect. So in order to make something of it, I thought if only I had my tripod, it would be quite good with a slightly longer exposure. So what I did was I put the shutter release onto fast burst mode and shot 64 frames as I braced myself to move as little as possible. That gave me what I needed to blend all of those frames together to create an average shutter speed across the 64 frames of 1/4 of a second. And that's the sort of shutter speed that I would have used if I'd had a tripod with me. It's done by stacking the exposures in Photoshop into layers, group all the layers together using a smart object, and set the blend mode to mean, so that it essentially averages out all of those layers to create that effect of 1/4 of a second shutter. Now, this next one is from the pubcast trip where we spent a few days in Scotland, and I'm sure that you've seen this castle 1,000 times. The reason I thought I'd share the image with you, though, is because including those 3 stones in the foreground created some debate when I shared it on social media. Now, it was a very deliberate technique that I used here. I wanted to emphasize the fact that the castle was way across on the far side of the lake, but I didn't want a big slab of boring water in the middle. If I'd gone wide angle, I would have ended up with the castle being tiny. So this is shot at 45mm, which of course is an equivalent of a 90mm shot on full frame. By standing back from the bank and including those stones and deliberately dropping them out of focus, they don't distract too much, but they add a layer of close depth to the image, which pushes the castle away without actually having to make the castle smaller in the frame. And that's what I was going for. I probably haven't explained myself very well there. Sorry about that. But 1 or 2 people did contact me and ask me, was it a mistake? I actually quite like it. It's not the sort of stuff that I normally shoot, but I wouldn't normally be there shooting that castle either. So there you go. This next shot, I've only included it because, again, from the pubcast trip to Scotland, and it was my favourite shot of the 3 days we were there. It's looking down Glencoe from an elevated vantage point, obviously a panorama shot, and we really didn't have great conditions while we were there, but I just felt that this particular composition was my favourite of the images that I got. If you want to see the other ones, they are on my Facebook page. Also, all of these images get shared to my Facebook group called Mostly Micro Four Thirds Landscapes. Within about 2 days of setting the group up, it was no longer just Micro Four Thirds. Anybody's welcome. So I'll put a link in the description. This last shot is from a flight in a light aircraft that my lovely daughter and son-in-law bought for me for my 60th birthday last year, and I didn't get round to using it until recently. I flew from Carnarvon Airport with a really nice chap who was quite happy for me not to bother learning how to fly, but to just hang through the window with my camera. I got 1 or 2 shots. It was very difficult because we were being buffeted about a little bit, and the window and the angle of the A-pillar on the cockpit meant that for most of the images that I wanted, I couldn't get a clean shot of it. But this is included because it was my favourite from the day. I felt that the position of Puffin Island was really nicely balanced in the frame, and I really like the line of surf as it swings down towards the bottom of the image. So there we are, we're all up to date, and it's about time we got out into the hills. Now, as of recording this video, I have no idea where I'm going because it depends on the parking. So let's go and have a trip out. When I set out from the house, I hadn't made my mind up on exactly where I was going to spend the night. It had a lot to do with what parking might be available. Coming down to Rhyd Ddu, though, usually at this time of year isn't too bad, and I got parked up. So what I thought I might do, which is something I don't think I've brought you with before, is to spend the night up on the summit of a Garn at the northeast end of the Nantlle Ridge. It's a really tortuous climb. It's not very long, it's only about a mile or so, but most of it's like that, so it's going to take me some time. The other thing is, of course, that knowing the lie of the land around here, I'm aware that there's no water up there. So when I came out of the house, of course, I don't bother lugging a load of water. So I'm just sat by this lovely little mountain stream. Do you know what? I could easily spend the night here, but I'm not going to. I'm going to carry about 2.5 litres in total, which is plenty because I know I'm going to need some to drink on the way up, and then I need enough to last me the night and for coffee in the morning. So yeah, I don't normally fill up my water bottles from the house until I've decided where I'm going. Some of my camping spots have got water by them, which means I don't have to carry any. So yeah, I'm going to be carrying a couple of extra kilos on this one. When I was a youngster, I'd have thought nothing of drinking straight out of a lovely clear mountain stream like this. I wouldn't in the modern age, of course, and although I'm pretty sure that if I did, it wouldn't affect me too much, but just one of the chores that goes with walking in the hills is filtering enough water. But at least I can do this. That's the great thing about walking in the mountains, is that there's water everywhere, except where I want to camp tonight. Oh, this weather is just fabulous. It's been a long time coming, and I'm really not that bothered about the photography. I thought I'd bring you with me because we haven't been out for quite a while, but I've got my little EN5 Mark III with me and my long kit lens, a 14 to 150 millimeter. I've also got an ultra lightweight tripod that I normally only use for video work. That's it. Couple of filters and a spare battery. We'll see what happens. It's supposed to be quite clear in the morning, so there may be some photography then, but as I said, I'm not really bothered. It's just a night out in the hills, which I've been intending to do for the last at least 4 weeks since I got back from Scotland with a pubcast crew, and bought a new tent because when I was in Scotland, that little tent, it's a great little tent, and if I was doing a through hike it would be perfect, but I'm prepared for a one-nighter to lug something a little bit heavier so that I can have a little bit more comfort. You'll be seeing that later on. Okay, that's that all dealt with. It's just gone 3 o'clock, plenty of time and time to get going. Well, I'm not exactly setting a new personal best here. I've been walking for about an hour and I'm probably about 2/3 of the way up at the moment, but the views are starting to open out and a nice bit of texture in the sky, so I'm starting to get increasingly hopeful for later on. I'm very grateful of this sharp northerly breeze that's blowing at the moment, but it remains to be seen how grateful I am for it in the small hours of tonight. Well, I've made it to the summit and there is no way I'm going to admit to you how long it took. The boys in the pubcast found out when we were in Scotland how slow I climb hills. I can go all day, I don't run out of steam, but I'm very, very slow and I stop for a lot of micro breaks along the way. But it means that even with my advanced years, I can still enjoy places like this, and my goodness, what a place. It is absolutely spectacular. I've got it to myself, and the great thing about this particular summit is there's plenty of room to camp, lots of flat grassy areas, and another plus up here, despite the negative of there not being any water, so I've had to lug it up, but there are dry stone walls running in different directions, and what that means is that no matter what the wind is doing, there's usually a bit of shelter to be had, which you don't get on many summits. So if you fancy staying on top of a ridge, this is a good spot, as long as you can put up with that colossally tough climb. So from up here, I've got Snowdon over my shoulder, and of course, come the morning, that's going to be the sunrise direction. The sun at the moment is probably about 4.5 hours away from setting into the Irish Sea, over behind Anglesey. I'm looking right across Anglesey. I can see Llanddwyn Island all the way across to Holyhead Mountain, and then the spectacular and jagged edges of the Nantlle Ridge as it runs off down towards the southwest and then down the Llŷn Peninsula. At the moment, the light is still quite harsh, so there's no rush for any photography. I'm going to set up camp, have something to eat before I even think about getting the camera out. I'm kind of thinking later on Nantlle Ridge with the sun going down over the sea, throwing some light across. That's what I'm hopeful for. It's reasonably clear on the horizon, so we'll see how that pans out. So I hadn't really planned to get the camera out, but I have done, because I noticed that the cliffs on Craigabera with the scree below it that creates a big chunk out of Mynydd Mawr was catching the light, and that's quite an interesting subject. In golden hour, I shot an image of it a couple of months ago from over the far side of the valley above Rhyd Ddu, but at this time of year I know that when the sun starts to get down, it's going to be around the other side of the mountain and that'll just be shadow. So I got the camera out and thought, right, let's have a go at this, because there is an image that I've had a go at previously when I've been up here, but I didn't get lucky with the light, and the light is kind of interesting. Also some quite nice clouds in the sky, particularly some high cirrus, which is running across in a diagonal pointing straight towards the summit of Mynydd Mawr. So I thought I could use that. But there's this really deep cleft in the ridge that I'm standing on, with a sheer drop down to the valley floor at the bottom, which then frames the bottom part of the mountainside. And you've got a lovely curve, almost like a horseshoe curve, that swings around, and it's all covered in wimberry bushes that are catching the light. There is a really bright slab of rock over onto the right hand side, so as a frame it's a bit leery. I'm going to have to try and deal with that in post to tone it down a bit, but quite a difficult composition because I haven't got a wide angle lens with me, and what I really wanted was to get the whole of this horseshoe in here. So decided to shoot it panoramic, and that's presenting additional challenges. Let me explain. They will tell you that if you shoot a panoramic image, you should really shoot it in manual mode so that the camera doesn't change the exposure as you're swinging it round between shots. So if you use aperture priority, for example, if the light changes while you're composing your panorama, you can end up with difficulties because you get images that are exposed at different values. So that's true for the most part, but what I needed to do was to take multiple exposures of each of the camera positions, because I'm going to have to do a fair bit of blending for each of the exposure positions to get those right before I then stitch them together. So it's going to be interesting to see whether I can pull it off. The bottom line is, if I don't pull it off, this bit of footage will never see the light of day, but it's worth a try because I do think it's quite an interesting image, and it really kind of tells the story of what it's like being up on this mountaintop. It's not very high, it's only about 630 meters, but the views are absolutely stunning. And when the park is busy, because this is a Saturday night, Ogwen Valley, Snowdon, all the other sort of hotspot areas are really quite busy at the moment, and yet I've got this all to myself. So yeah, having quite a good time. Time to have something to eat now. I've got an hour or so before I need to think about any more photography, but hopefully this one will work out okay. Well, that's dinner all taken care of. Firepot pork and beans, highly recommended. I've had an hour or so just relaxing and recovering from my walk, and I'm back out with the camera. I'm actually quite some way from where I've pitched my tent because I wanted to get a really panoramic view of the whole of the Nantlle Ridge, and I'm set up for a panorama shot, hopefully much easier than the one I shot earlier. But you may not even know about that because it might not have been included in the video. So anyway, what I'm doing is I'm planning to shoot a 4 or 5 shot panorama where I've got the ridges coming down from the top of the Nantlle down into the bottom right corner of the image, with a really nice run of foreground rocks that also follows that same diagonal. So hopefully I'm really comfortable with the composition, but the problem I've got is that there's a lot of cloud on the horizon, and even though there's still about 45 minutes, 30 minutes till sunset, it may well be that that light drops off, and if it goes, this image just won't work at all. So I'm gonna take a series now so that I've got it in the bag ready, and then I'll just hang around here with my tin of beer for another half hour and see what happens. Well, as I feared, the light did peter out, not much of a sunset to speak of. but it has meant that I can get an early night because sunrise is 5 a.m. so I've decided to set my alarm for 4:15, give me plenty of time to get a cup of coffee and get organised, see what's going on. Of course, I'll just unzip the tent, have a look out, and if there's nothing doing, I'll go back to sleep for a couple of hours. But yeah, early night, got my thermals on, which is just as well because quite a sharp breeze has come up now and it's supposed to be around about 0 degrees come the end of the night. But I've got this new tent, as I mentioned earlier, and as you can see, I can sit up in it. I've got my deck chair inside. It's absolutely brilliant. I've never had these levels of luxury when I'm camping before, and it all came out of when we were in Scotland and we got absolutely soaked. We were lucky because we were in a campsite, but if we'd have been in our little kind of one-man canvas coffins, changing out of wet clothes and trying to get organised would have been an absolute nightmare. So I don't know how waterproof this tent is because it is a 60 quid CCKO from Amazon, highly recommended by the reviewers, but of course most of those are probably bots. So we'll see. I will try it in some heavy rain, but probably in the garden at home. I'm not going to come out onto a ridge for the first time to see whether or not the hydrostatic figures are true. Anyway, it is spacious and it's holding up perfectly well in a very light breeze. The question is going to be whether or not I can keep warm. Anyway, I'll say good night and we'll see what tomorrow brings. Good morning, and what a morning it is. There's no finer place to wake up than on a Snowdonia ridge, especially when the wind dropped off in the night and it's now perfectly still. It's going to be a beautifully warm day and I've got a shot lined up already. It's actually sunrise in about 2 minutes, but I do have quite a bank of cloud over where the sun's going to come up. So it's going to buy me 10 or 15 minutes before it actually puts in an appearance. My photograph or my composition, Llyn Ddu in the mid-ground, got a little bit of foreground up here. I'm right exactly on the summit of a Garn, and I've just got a little bit of the summit cairn in my bottom right-hand corner of my composition. But I can just see the fringes of the clouds starting to light up now. So time to get my head in the game and get ready for this and see what I can make of it. I've been up for a couple of hours now and haven't even had a cup of coffee yet, so it's time for breakfast. We're through golden hour, the sun's climbing in the sky and I'm in no rush to walk back down off the mountain. I'm going to have my coffee and a leisurely breakfast, take my time over it and just enjoy being up here. But I have enjoyed the photography this morning, approximately 45 minutes working on the first shot where it was dependent on everything coming together. So I've got a number of exposures to blend together and I've just got the sun just kissing the top of the clouds over Snowdon. So we'll see how that pans out. But of course, once the sun's up and you've got this really nice horizontal golden light, the shapes in the mountains really start to take on a life of their own. And I'm hopeful I'll have 1 or 2 shots to share with you at the end. But I'm going to leave it there for this one. Thank you ever so much for joining me. I really hope you've enjoyed it. And if you have, why not subscribe and join me next time? Cheers.